GM Manager of Talent and List Strategy is Justin Leppitsch, and he's joining us on the line now. After a trade period, I reckon, where they wanted a lot, they got a bit, and in the end, they go again next year trying to win a flag, their second in 3 years. G'day, Leppa. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, boys.
Leppa, let's start with the ins. So Jack Buller comes in from the Sydney Swans. I imagine this one took a little bit longer than what you thought. In the cold light of day, how do you evaluate your acquisitions in terms of draft picks and also players this year?
Well, look, it was always going to be a consolidation year for us. Obviously, we went quite heavy last season, and you can't continue to do that season upon season. I don't know any team that's been able to do that. So we feel like we've got a really good list in order. We've still got a great crop of young kids that are coming through that haven't had the exposure that probably needed. So we think we've got some great stuff currently on our list. We've got Harvey Harrison coming back from a knee as well, and Reece McGuinness. So we've got some good options. And then Jack Buller adds to that. He's not obviously the youth. He's 24 years of age. He's put a lot of local footy. His back end of last season was terrific. I watched a lot of him throughout his VFL early season as well, and noticed he couldn't quite get into that team in front of the Marty that was playing at the time and McLean, and he couldn't quite get in there. And then he found his way in, and then I was watching him closely, and he started playing well. And at the end of the season, had a big game against West Coast late. But we're hoping it's a pick that can spike for us. But we're in that market this year. We weren't in the position to go after anything too big.
Yeah, it feels like, Leppa, you had the consolidation year you had to have in the trade period with Perryman and Houston coming in last year. Dan Houston wasn't criticised, but probably didn't get the levels that he did with Port Adelaide over his career. Do you see his role changing at all so that you can get more out of him going forward into 2026?
Yeah, it's a good call. We'll talk with Fly on how he's going to alter the game plan if he does, or deploy his troops in a different way. Obviously, one thing we know, we've got Josh Dacos, who's one of the game's elite halfbacks, and Dan Houston. But I guess the problem with that is you can only have one quarterback sometimes, and they get the ball. So I think Dan had to play a slightly different role for us this year to what he had at Port Adelaide. And coupled with that, the different game style as well. We're a lot more direct by nature. We're a lower possession-based team compared to Port. So, there was a bit of an adjustment period for him as well. And we kind of hope a bit like Lockie Schultz the year before. His second year will be much better, and probably more like the Port Adelaide Dan that we saw.
We all love watching Nick Dacos and the Dacos brothers and Pendlebury and Sidebottom play, but one of my favourite players of Collingwood was Brody Mihocek over his career. Just the way he was the heart and soul of your forward line, played any role he needed to play, and really was selfless in that forward line. Was it hard to let him go?
It was. We're put in a difficult position. We go into the start of this season thinking that, okay, well, Pendles is probably going, and Howie's probably going, and Steele, and by mid-year, Steele's touted as being an All-Australian. So Jamie Elliott's leading the goal kicking, and it just, which is a fantastic problem to have. But and that's the tricky nature in planning for the future when you've got a list of guys that are on one-year deals. You're not quite sure. And even sit here right now thinking, probably Steele might be finished, or Pendles, or Howie, but who knows? They may, have similar years and challenge us to keep them on. So it was difficult, and we got to a point where to move forward, it got to the point where something had to break, and we couldn't keep all of them. Unfortunately, it was Brody, and I guess that's where Jack Buller comes in to replace that. He's no Brody Mihocek, of course. He's in the early phases of his career, but that's where it's at the end of the day.
The other player that I couldn't see ever leaving Collingwood was Jamie Elliott. At the end of the season, didn't have a contract signed. You got that done. Was he ever any chance of leaving, or was just really just getting with him after the season and making sure you had a deal that worked for both parties?
Yeah, he was a chance of leaving. That's for sure. We're able to get the deal done in the end. I guess the challenge is always when there's always another team that's going to pay more. I think that's the reality, and we have to deal with that. It's funny, I've only done this job for over 12 months now, but about value, it's a balance. It's what you think it is, and then what somebody else is willing to pay, and you've got to meet in the middle. You got stories like Jack Gunston, who's an All-Australian and one of the best and fairest, signs a one-year deal and stays. And then you've got situations where, guys are getting targeted and they're paying a bit more. So, again, the value is whatever it is at the end of the day, which made it tricky for us. But he stays, which is a good thing for us.
Leppa, give us the truth around the Jordan De Goey situation. Was there any phone calls, any discussions around potentially trading him?
I feel like I'm the only one that's saying the truth through this whole Jordan De Goey thing, to be honest. We've spoken to his management and more about the long term. I mean, Geordie's got 2 years to run. I speak to Ryan, and it is Geordie would like to look at what point is that long-term contract going to come to finish his career. That's really where the conversations end and started. And in their words, it was, this time next year we'll look at that. So that is why it is. And they're really mature. Ryan and Geordie are both really mature on, we understand where is our team going to be in 12 months? Where should I be deployed? Is it with Collingwood? Is it with... So that is the tone of the conversation, but it was never once anyone driving Geordie wanting to leave or us wanting to drive him out. But that's really it. So it was a very mature conversation with his manager maybe 4, 5, 6 months ago, really. And the only time I heard it back again was during the trade period. So, and I've been in constant conversation with Ryan to say, is there any truth to the rumour that he's having a coffee with Sauce, whatever cafe it is? And it's like, no. And that's about it. And I was just really reacting to the rumours other than that.
Leppa, how difficult is it in your role managing a list which is ageing and keeping everyone within the salary cap and making sure that you contend every year?
The way some people comment, you would think it's easy, but it's actually not. Obviously, it's also players sometimes see what you pay them is how much you love them, and that's the trickiest part of this role. I'm a coach, so I've come from a role where you sort of love and support players and care about them, and now it's almost saying, now you've got to rank us on how much you love us to how much you pay us, and there's no real link to that, but that's the greatest challenge in the role, is to want to love and support your players and give them what they want, but knowing also you've got to fit into the restraints of a cap and all those sorts of things. It makes it really tricky, and it means you've got to make tough decisions and hard decisions. But I'm lucky I've got great support with Charlie Gardner and Craig Kelly, who's been around the game a long period of time, and now got my team, Shane O'Breeze in here. He's got a former coach, terrific football brain, and so we've got a great team around to make these decisions and support each other in it.
One of the forgotten men, I think, in football is Tom Mitchell. He's, Brownlow medalist, now premiership player. It felt like during the finals or toward the end of the year with Ned Long and Pendles, there wasn't a role with him in there. What's the future for Tom? Will he be at Collingwood next year?
Yeah, we've got that meeting tomorrow at 10:30, where we now pick up the pieces of what's left. Obviously, we didn't know whether Jai was going to enter the building or not, and obviously every decision like that has a flow-on effect down. So, yeah, we'll do that tomorrow, and he's in that with Mason and Lockie Sullivan and Noah House. There's a few of our boys that are waiting on answers that that need them, and we want to get that to them ASAP. That'll happen tomorrow.
So Mason Cox is there tomorrow as well. There's a few big decisions ahead for you and also them. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Jai Simpkin, was North Melbourne asking too much for him?
Well, it was an interesting one. I get it from their perspective. It's the captain, their leader, and going back to the value piece before, it's very funny. We had Taylor Adams leave us a few years ago. He was a midfielder that got sort of kicked out of the square to half forward, and we traded him for a pick 33 to Sydney at 30. He's a couple of years older than Jai, of course, but so again, it's they rate Jai's leadership and what he brings and all those sorts of things, And I get that. There's no criticism of North Melbourne at all. It's just that we had our parameters as well. He was coming to us to, fill our long-term needs. Eventually when Steele and maybe Jack Chris might play till he's 45 the way he's going. But, we saw him as a guy that could, get that steady stream of replacement without having to rely on our 18-year-olds too much. So that was the purpose. It would have been great to have. But the club wasn't willing to go to that level to do it. So, we wish Jai all the best. He's a fantastic human being and a great person, and, wish him all the best for the future.
Collingwood's the biggest brand in the land, and normally when they go after a free agent, it lands if the deal works for both parties, just because the attractiveness of the club, what you've achieved, the crowds, who you are. The Oliver situation, choosing to go to GWS instead, did you ever get a chance to get in front of him, or he just basically was GWS all the way?
Oh, no, that was an interesting one. We got rang by his management. We decided not to pursue it sort of early on the Monday. I spoke to Clayton a few times. I know we probably haven't given a running commentary on this one, but I think I think really his management wanted to steer him to there as well. And look, I actually wanted what was best for Clayton. I had a good 10-minute chat with him on the phone, and we talked. I felt like I was coaching him. We were talking about football and where to be, and if he does move to Sydney, how does he transition the people around him? Because he's got a really set group of physios and people he uses around him to get up from week to week. He's quite a pro in that part of things. So. I was actually trying to talk about what if he does leave the state. Like, it was a very different conversation. I think all the conversations I have with players, I want to make sure they want to be where they want to be. Even going back to Dan McStay 3 years ago, when he thought to come to Collingwood, I said, mate, it's not about what I want. Make sure you make the choice that's right for you, because you've got to be happy. If you're happy, you'll play good football. So most of the chats I had with Clayton was around that. And I think, getting off that phone, I felt he also thought that he didn't want to move to Sydney. I don't think, given the fact he had to leave his family and those people. But I think he knew deep down his best thing was to go to Sydney. And I think walking away from that phone call, I thought the same. I rang Nick Geesh and I thought, I think this is the best thing for him to head up there and start a new life.
Leppa, appreciate your time. Good luck for the draft, and thanks for being so generous this morning.
All right, guys.